Hello and welcome to The Edge. Well, we'll take an in-depth analysis of today's top stories by looking beyond the edge. We'll bring you not just the facts, but also deep insights into the topics with expert opinions and social media reactions. Let's make a start with our look beyond the edge. Germany's centre-left Social Democrats have claimed victory in the federal election, telling the party of outgoing Chancellor Angela Merkel it should no longer be in power. SPD leader Olaf Scholz says that he has a clear mandate to form a government, while his Conservative rival Armin Laschet remains determined to fight on. Will a shift to the left alter Germany's EU economic power? Long lines of traffic continued to queue outside fuel stations in the United Kingdom after thousands of forecourts ran out dry over the weekend amid a shortage of lorry drivers to transport fuel from refineries. The haulage industry says that there's a shortage of truck drivers due to a range of factors, including coronavirus and Brexit. Why is this happening now, and has the pandemic intensified the problem? And the Taliban government in Afghanistan appealed for international flights to resume, promising full cooperation with airlines. And the problems at Kabul Hamid Karzai International Airport have been resolved. A limited number of aid and passenger flights have been operating from the airport, but normal commercial services have yet to resume since it was closed in the wake of the chaotic evacuation process. But how is the normalization process ongoing in Afghanistan? And these are the top three stories that we'll be looking at today from Beyond the Edge. Let's get started. German politics have a reputation for being staid, predictable and even boring. But not this time. This was an election night on a knife edge, with Germany's two main political parties jostling for the lead. Our following infographic has more. Projected results show that Germany's Social Democrats have a narrow win after Sunday's national election. They're claiming a clear mandate to lead a government for the first time since 2005, bringing an end to 16 years of Conservative-led rule under Angela Merkel.
Germany's Social Democrats narrowly won a milestone election on Sunday, a victory that marks an end to 16 years of Conservative rule under Angela Merkel. Projected results showed the center-left Social Democrats were on track for 26% of the vote, ahead of nearly 25% for the Conservative bloc, though both groups believe they could lead the next government. SPD's candidate for Chancellor Olaf Scholz thanked his supporters.
And of course, I'm very happy about the election result that the citizens of this country have chosen. They have decided that the SPD should rise upwards, and that is a big success.
Scholz would become the fourth Socialist Democrat chancellor since World War II. His conservative rival, Armin Laschet, signaled his bloc was not ready to concede, though his supporters were more subdued.
We will do everything possible to build a conservative-led government because Germany Deutschland.
Germany now needs a future coalition that modernizes our country.
The most likely outcome is a three-way alliance involving the smaller Greens and liberal Free Democrats, led by either the Social Democrats or Merkel's Conservatives. A new coalition could take months, and Merkel will remain in charge in a caretaker role while Scholz and Laschet court the support of the smaller parties. They have both said they aim to form a coalition before Christmas.
And I'm now joined live from Berlin in Germany by Olaf Bernke, who's a European policy expert and political analyst. Olaf, thank you for joining us today here on The Edge. A very exciting weekend over the weekend for Germany with the elections. Nobody was willing to try and make a prediction ahead of the vote, but can I say that a clear result appears to have emerged?
Yes and no. The problem really is, so the one strong evidence we have right now is that Angela Merkel, just by her personality, was dominating the political landscape in Germany for exactly the last 16 years. And the moment she stepped aside, everyone realized that the CDU is kind of a hollow party. At least that was the reflections by many commentators who decided actually not to vote this time for the CDU because Angela Merkel was gone. So she was pretty much the program. The CDU for the last 16 years had not really been a very ideological political party in that sense. It was pretty much about her. So right now we have kind of a stalemate. Yes, the center-left SPD is leading by 1.7%. The CDU is close by, and then we have two junior partners, the liberal FDP with about 11% and the Greens with almost 15%. And the question, as it was pointed out in your feature, is really, so who's leading that coalition? Because both big parties are now dependent on the smaller parties, but both parties, the smaller junior parties, actually really come from very, very different political angles. And so therefore, the time which will be needed to negotiate such a coalition will predominantly be spent on convincing those junior partners to form a coalition together.
And I assume that in trying to build a coalition, this gives tremendous power to those smaller parties.
Absolutely, and you could see that. So there was a huge portion of self-confidence yesterday. We have traditionally at 8 p.m., 2 hours after the polls closed, a meeting of all the head of parties, all the chairperson, discussing on public TV the results. And here you could see that the chairman of the FDP Liberals made an offer in public to the Greens to first have a negotiation and a consultation about who they want to coalesce with and build a coalition, and then give the big parties actually the mandate to lead and moderate these kind of coalition talks. That was a very unusual step, and as you could see, so that was just out of that pure self-confidence that you will need us, so therefore we are the kingmakers.
And in fact, putting their totals together actually puts them slightly ahead of the SPD and the CDU as individual as voting blocks. So do they have a natural tendency towards the CDU or towards the SPD, do you think?
Yeah, again, so that makes the situation so interesting because the Greens naturally go with the Social Democrats. They formed in 1998 with Gerhard Schröder and Joschka Fischer, the first red-green government until 2005. And the FDP is the traditional partner of the CDU. So, and of course, now it's for both parties, the FDP in the last weeks tried to convince the Greens to maybe enter a coalition with the CDU, while the Greens tried to convince the Liberals, and that's going on. So that's my expectation for the coming weeks, that in these junior partner talks, so they will try to convince the other to join the club with their traditional beloved partner. I think the one difference here you can see is that the political momentum is definitely with the SPD. So the Olaf Scholz led the party from a third candidate in the race. So back in April, we had the CDU polling at about 30%. The Greens were close to 25%. And in a way, people felt pity for the SPD that they even dared to nominate a candidate because they were about 13–14%. And Olaf Scholz made its way, so he realized that people are not really up for change, definitely not for change when it comes to the personality of who's leading the country. And he started to copy Angela Merkel's behavior. He even imitated her very famous hand movement, the so-called Raute. And that even forced a reaction by Angela Merkel herself, claiming that he's not her natural successor. So the momentum is with him. He won by 5% in comparison to the 2017 election. And Armin Laschet, he lost almost 9% in comparison to 2017. So therefore, the question is, as a junior partner, do you want to join a coalition with a winner or with a loser? I think that's the one momentum Olaf Scholz is now building on, that he can form the coalition, and that's why he claimed, okay, I have this natural right now actually to start with this negotiation talks.
Well, you make a very important point there, using the word momentum, and looking at the historical polling over the last 18 months or so. Whilst the CDU was running very high, throughout this year, they've been dropping away significantly, and that's been reflected by the SDP. So had the votes been crossing over from CDU to SDP, and does this give an indication that the SDP, looking into the future, could continue to rise as a party and be the future of Germany, maybe?
Yeah, that's the interesting question, sir. Indeed, sir. As I said, so back in May or in April, so there was no chance, and if no one would have bet a penny, if you wouldn't have an SPD memberships, that the SPD has a chance at all. But the thing is that both candidates, Armin Laschet for the CDU and Annalena Baerbock, who was very close in that race to become second or maybe even the first Green female chancellor, both made a couple of individual mistakes, and maybe Olaf Scholz's biggest achievement throughout the election campaign was to make no mistakes at all and to stay very calm in his reaction. So in all the TV debates we have seen, you mentioned that in the very beginning, so German policy has this stereotype of being very boring. He was the boring candidate, and people ask, okay, why should we vote for him? But as it turned out, it resonated absolutely with voters. And this is the interesting thing. Look at the demographics in Germany. So Olaf Scholz won the highest share of votes in the 60-plus senior German citizens camp. So this is traditional CDU ground. So he copied also the tactics of Angela Merkel to attack actually your political opponent in his very own hood. So therefore, this is also something which, must feel very, very painful on the side of the CDU, seeing that seniors preferred the SPD candidate over the conservative candidate because they simply trust Olaf Scholz more to lead the country than Armin Laschet.
Now, about these demographics and connected with that, the turnout of the exam, of the election, do we yet have any idea what sort of turnout there was? And does this, the population of Germany tends towards the older spectrum. Does this leave the younger people feeling left out in this process?
Yeah. So on your later question, absolutely. This is one of the top news today. That in the if you look at it from a demographic point of view, so first-time voters only had a 5% share, while the seniors with a 60+ had almost 40% of the entire electorate. So therefore, you could see, and it was also reflected in a very interesting way in the SPD campaign, so where you could see that they were addressing issues like pensions and healthcare in a way actually that obviously resonated very strongly with especially older people. The young people feel betrayed. So you could listen on national radio the entire day that people in the age of 18 to 25 felt, okay, so no one really cared about our needs and our interests, and especially not when it comes to climate change. So the Green Party is the only party in the political spectrum right now who had a strong approach on, okay, we need to do something right now. So they pretty much reflected the Fridays for Future demonstrations. And you could see, if you look into who the younger generation actually voted for, by far the Greens would have had an absolute majority in that spectrum. But interesting also, the FDP also scored high with young voters. Because people realized, okay, they don't belong to the classical big tent party, and we trust actually that they will really live up to what they promised before election day. So therefore, in this regard, you could see that there were significant differences when it comes to the different generations in Germany. On the voter turnout, yes, this was a very high voter turnout. We had almost 80%. And after 2 consecutive elections where the voter turnout went down to 70%, which is still high in comparison to other countries like the US, but still it was significant. Usually we have it about 80, 85%, and there was, I think we were close to 69, something like that, so in the high 60s. And the pandemic, obviously, and this election campaign motivated people, so not scared them off to go for the ballot boxes and to make their vote. And we had long queues in front of the election offices, and even some, so which is very rare that you have after 6 o'clock when the offices usually close. Actually, you still had people waiting in line who could then also drop their vote. Yeah.
Well, that's a great sign for democracy, that people want to get out there and cast their votes. So congratulations to Germany on that note. Now, obviously, we could carry on talking for hours, I'm sure. Just in a very, in a nutshell, how long do you think it will be before the new government is able to move forward?
So if you look back in the last 4 or 5 elections, so we had an average between 30 and 60 days. So, but if you look back just 4 years ago, where we had already a situation like this, where the CDU first started to negotiate exactly with the very same junior partners, the FDP Liberals and the Green Party, and then the FDP Liberals called the deal off at the very last moment. And this then caused the SPD to say, okay, actually, we were preparing for being the biggest opposition party, but we feel the pressure to govern, to live up to our duty, and so we will re-enter coalition talks with the CDU. We had 171 days without government, so just the caretaker government of Angela Merkel. So there was almost 6 months. So this gives you an idea how long this could take, especially if both of the big tent parties are really starting to negotiate with the 2 smaller junior partners about the best deal. They will definitely do everything to make them pay a high price for their very political preferences. So therefore, definitely, as it was said in your announcement, so Angela Merkel should have no plans before Christmas. But my bet would even be that goes beyond. So let's talk about again maybe in February or March.
Right.
That's something. So what I'm expecting.
Well, it's a very interesting process, and thank you so much for taking us through some of it this evening, Olaf. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. And it's the first time that Germany is facing a 3-way coalition, but this country has entered a new political era, and the talking is yet to begin. Beyond the 4 mainstream parties, it was a bad night for the radical left, and although the far-right AfD's share of the vote appears to have slipped nationally, it's said to be the largest party in the eastern states of Saxony and Thuringia. We'll keep you updated on the coalition talks, which can take weeks, or as we've heard, maybe months. But for now, let's move on to our next topic to speak about the fuel crisis in the United Kingdom. Shortage of lorry drivers in the United Kingdom has caused problems for a range of industries in recent months, from supermarkets to fast food chains. Our following infographic explains. More chaos is facing the United Kingdom with blame for a nationwide fuel shortage and panic buying, bringing out old tensions over Brexit.
People in Britain should buy petrol as usual, Environment Minister George Eustice said on Monday, adding there was no shortage of fuel, but problems were being caused by customers panic buying fuel they didn't need.
We can only continue to reassure people that we have plenty of petrol, both in storage, coming out of those refineries as well. And the only reason that we have an issue at the moment with some petrol stations not having petrol in the forecourts is that people are buying petrol and they wouldn't. The most important thing everyone can do is just get back to normal, fill their cars up as they normally would, and not buy petrol unless they need it.
Adding that the UK had no place yet to get the army to drive trucks to deliver fuel to petrol stations after shortage of drivers strained supply chains. Eustice said Ministry of Defence trainers were being drafted in to help clear a backlog of heavy goods vehicle tests. Up to 90% of British fuel stations ran dry across major English cities on Monday after panic buying deepened the supply chain crisis triggered by a shortage of truckers that retailers are warning could batter the world's fifth largest economy.
I haven't been out and panic bought like all the other sheep and idiots. So I've waited here today on my way to work, got some fuel, and the price has gone up by nearly 6p a litre for no reason.
A dire post-Brexit shortage of lorry drivers emerging after the COVID-19 pandemic has sown chaos through British supply chains in everything from food to fuel, raising the spectre of disruptions and price rises in the run-up to Christmas.
And to discuss the situation in the UK, I'm joined live from London by A News correspondent Alpazlan Divan. Alpazlan, thank you for joining us here today on The Edge. Hello. Fuel shortages in England, I remember them back in the 70s, but I'm sure it's very different today. What is the situation right now in England?
Well, Andy, as you said, a long time ago, it used to be, huge queues, but now in 2021, it's a really difficult time. The fuel shortages and the painful queues for the pumps are expected to last for the rest of the week. But one of the Boris Johnson's most senior ministers, today he insisted that the army would not be brought in immediately to drive tankers as manic panic buying continues across Britain. Tens of thousands more Britons are working from home today as the fuel crisis saw up to 9 in 10 forecourts run dry, leaving NHS staff, including doctors and nurses, without petrol, and schools planning to return to online learning because the teachers can't fill up their cars. Meanwhile, the lack of fuel in some forecourts has led to a call from the British Medical Association for healthcare staff and essential workers to be given priority access. On the other hand, Boris Johnson has said he could call in the army to deliver petrol and diesel across Britain, and a crisis that has seen competition law suspended to allow businesses such as Shell and BP to share drivers. But his plan to bring in 5,000 foreign lorry drivers to deal with the shortage suffered a major blow after he had of an EU truck union declaring they will not go to the UK for a short-term visa to help the UK out of the problem they created themselves. Downing Street denied that the government was blaming the public, saying, we completely understand people's anxiety. That's why we are doing everything possible to reassure people that stocks are secure. The government said on Sunday it will temporarily exempt fuel companies from competition law as part of long-standing contingency plans to maintain supplies, allowing them to target supplies at areas most needed. A British Secretary Quating, he said, allowing the industry to share information would mean companies could work together more effectively to minimize disruptions. On Saturday, the government also announced it will offered temporary visa lasting until Christmas Eve to 5,000 foreign fuel tankers and food lorry drivers and 5,500 poultry workers in bid to limit disruption in the build-up after Christmas. Other measures, including sending nearly 1 million letters to the drivers who hold an HGV license to encourage them back into the industry, and plans to train 4,000 people to become HGV drivers. And many in governments are hoping the situation begins to resolve itself. They believe many people worried about shortages have already filled up their tanks, so the situation may start to die down. But if we continue to see queues at petrol stations, there will be significant pressure for actions. We know the new visas for HGV drivers aren't an overnight fix. So the option of sending the army to drive tankers for forecourts is being kept on the table. If it happens, it will be based on the no-deal Brexit planning, which officials have been dusting off in recent days, Andy.
Well, the very interesting thing is that this problem with the HGV drivers, the heavy good vehicle drivers, it can't be something that just happened last week. This is a problem that's been building up, I'm sure, for years and made worse by coronavirus. So why hadn't the government started to do something about that before now? And why is it, do you think, that the British public have suddenly started panic buying? What triggered that?
You know, Andy, when the coronavirus started, when the lockdown started, people before the lockdown they rushed for the toilet papers. We saw the unexpected, the images of footages, people fighting for the toilet papers. And now we see the people fighting for the fuels. That's unacceptable. This is really maniac, panic buying. This is true. Government right on this, but otherwise governments should, take caution before the Brexit, and they did. They're going to do something if something happened like this, like similar situation now we have in here. But unfortunately, the government didn't do anything for this kind of situation, we're facing right now. And that's why people are angry with the government. And people blaming to government blame to people. And, we don't know what, the situation is going to worse. Out there, just, cars are horning. They're not happy. People are really angry. Some of the British people I've never seen they get angry when they're driving, but they now really they're angry. They're not happy, to be honest with you. And people are, scared of the prices going, high, like food prices. Yes. I went to supermarket this afternoon. I spoke to one of the Turkish supermarket owner. He said the price is going up. And unexpectedly, and because of the fuel shortages. But governments say there is no fuel shortages, there is no problem with the fuel, we have enough, just don't panic. And the people, well, you can't stop the people, they panic, to be honest with you. Half of the blame to people and half the government, maybe most the government.
Well, the government have to bring this under control somehow. And of course, the lorry drivers, this is giving them the opportunity to say why they're unhappy with the treatment that they receive. I believe lorry drivers have been leaving their jobs over the years. Have you heard anything from any lorry drivers about why this is why this crisis has been allowed to grow?
Sorry, and I didn't get your question.
The lorry drivers are also under tremendous pressure. They've been leaving the industry, and this is what's causing the shortage of drivers. Has this given the lorry drivers an opportunity to put their case for improvements?
Well, Andy, there are lots of job opportunities in these countries. Now the government is sending 1 million letters to the drivers who hold an HGV license to encourage them back into the industry, and plans to train 4,000 people to become HGV drivers. But I've seen few like Twitter kind of like a posts from the HGV drivers. They said there is no problem with the HGV drivers. We don't have any problem with this, and we don't know why the government, created this situation, created this problem. We had enough drivers, lorry drivers, HGV drivers, and we don't even know where this problem, where this shortages comes from. And this is another side of the situation, another opinion about the situation we have in right now. And some Turkish people, trying to apply for the HGV driver as a HGV driver to become, the driver in the United Kingdom, come here to the United Kingdom, which is very, opportunistic way to apply for a visa to come here. Very good opportunity for them, to be honest with you. And here in the United Kingdom, there are, lots of lorry drivers already, I believe, and I heard from the associations like British organizing like this kind of events like HGV drivers or all this stuff, and they said that, many people calling them and they asking for the job, become a HGV drivers if there is a shortages. They said we have only few places to replace at the moment. We don't need too many HGV drivers, and they already the applying for it, and they take in the applications. Things is going to be all right maybe within few days. We are expecting this week they're going to sort it out, all this problem, and then we're going to go back to normal, and there will be no fuel shortages and no HGV drivers shortages. Hopefully they're going to sort it out, this problem, this week until Wednesday. We're expecting, the government saying until Wednesday everything is going to be normal.
Well, we'll keep a close eye on the situation, and let's hope this situation does resolve itself very quickly. Sirajuddin, thank you so much for joining us from London. Thank you. The shortage of drivers and other workers is also causing concern in the food and retail industry. The British Retail Consortium says that the number of visas being offered is too small to make an impact on the disruption expected at Christmas. And it seems as if the situation will deteriorate further. But the coming weeks will show if the government can find a solution for the problem. For now, let's move on to our final topic to speak about the recent developments in Afghanistan. The Taliban has announced its new government. But what do we know about it? Let's take a look at this infographic for more. Afghanistan's interim government has assured the international community that Hamid Karzai Airport in the capital of Kabul is fully operational for domestic and international flights.
Afghanistan's Hamid Karzai International Airport is now fully operational for international flights, and all airliners can resume airlifts. The problems at Kabul International Airport have now been resolved, and the airport is fully operational for domestic and international flights. The interim government in the country has assured all airlines of its full cooperation and expects all airlines and countries that had previously flown to Kabul to resume their flights as before. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs once again assured full cooperation on its part in conducting flights more than 40 days after the Taliban takeover. The Kabul airport was damaged with its many facilities destroyed during the withdrawal of US-led forces and American nationals on the 31st of August. Airport authorities confirmed that the Kabul airport had received planes carrying humanitarian assistance from Qatar, Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan and Pakistan. Kabul International Airport has also received a number of commercial flights from Pakistan, Iran and Qatar in recent weeks, despite a long suspension in flights since mid-August.
I'm now joined live from Ankara in Turkey by Gal Luft, who's a security analyst and professor with Ostim Teknik University. Gal, thank you so much for joining us again here today on The Edge. Some positive news from Afghanistan that the Taliban say that the airport is now open for both domestic and international flights. What can you tell us about the latest situation?
I think that the Taliban is really eager to open this airport because it's their way of showing that they can stand by their promise that they would allow safe passage to those people who wish to leave the country, including 100 Americans, but many other nationalities, as well as Afghans themselves who might want to leave the country. And you know, we just finished a very, very busy week on the international front with the United Nations General Assembly and meeting of the summit of the Quad and other Quad is this quasi-alliance of United States, India, Japan, and Australia. And several other gatherings, and a lot of leaders meeting each other and talking. Everybody wants to talk about Afghanistan. And it turns out that there is a lot of agreement, there is a strong consensus within the international community that the main test that the Taliban will have to pass in order to move forward towards broad international recognition would be this safe passage test. And for this, they need to open the airport, and they need to show that they are serious. Mm-hmm. If they fail this test, I think the international community will understand that this is the same old Taliban. It's not a reformed one, and it will be very hard to move forward into broad recognition of the current government.
Now, after the evacuation was completed, we saw that the airport had received a lot of damage, maybe partly due to the U.S. forces destroying things on the way out. How have they managed to get things back into good shape so that it can become an operational airport again? What help have they received?
Well, they received help, I think, primarily from Turkey and Qatar in the technical sense. Of course, there was some cleanup work that had to be done. But in the end of the day, let us not forget that operating an airport is a very, very serious business. And in the end of the day, there are insurance companies that want to make sure that in order to insure those commercial operators, the big airlines that want to run commercial flights into the country, those planes need to be insured, and those insurers need to be sure that those airports operate according to all the safety protocols. And there are all kinds of professional service providers who go and inspect and give the sort of the clean bill of health that the airport is ready and safe, and all the vehicles that can respond to accidents or all the mishaps that could happen at an airport. Unfortunately, they want to make sure that this airport can respond to any possibility, and all of this needs to happen before the winter. Because now the temperatures and the weather is still ideal, but let's not forget that Afghanistan winter is a whole different thing. So this is the time that they need to make sure that everything is ready so that they can maintain this airport and conduct normal aviation through the winter months. That's not only in Kabul, but in other airports around the country.
Now, of course, on top of the security concerns that any airport has, wherever you are in the world, whether it's Los Angeles, New York, Paris, Rome, wherever, as you say, every airport has strict controls and safety standards to live up to. But we could say that Kabul Airport is in a unique situation, that it has an even greater level of security needed because of the terror threat that must be looming over it. As right now, it's a very sensitive political target if somebody were to strike it. What security measures have been taken or should be taken, in your opinion, to ensure that nothing untoward happens at Kabul?
Well, of course, there is the conventional security measures that are being taken in any airport. There's nothing different in Afghanistan. But from a security analyst perspective, the thing that is most concerning is the potential availability of shoulder-launched missiles.
Right.
We've heard some stories about missiles that have been disappeared or maybe changed hands throughout this withdrawal process, and that's a real concern. I mean, if you look at the videos that you are showing the audience right now, you see that the airport is very close to the city itself, and you could certainly, from a certain vantage point, use short-range missiles, and that's a concern. It's not an easy problem to solve, but it's also not a new problem. Airport security officials know how to deal with this problem. There are certain technologies. I'm not sure that those technologies are already deployed in Afghanistan, but certainly the most important thing is to make sure that the perimeter is protected. But I do agree that the level of security in the Kabul airport is still behind all of those other airports that you mentioned. This is a real concern, mm-hmm. and I would not dismiss it in light of everything we've seen in the past 2 months.
So there's a great deal of work still needs to be done, but let's hope that the first steps towards normality are able to be taken, and that free transport or free availability of transport becomes available to people who want to leave or even to enter Afghanistan. Galduff, thank you so much for joining us here today on The Edge and giving us your perspective. Thank you. Now, the interim government in the country has assured all airlines of its full cooperation and expects all airlines and countries that have previously flown to Kabul to resume their flights as before, which is an important step towards normalisation. So our analysts have provided their insights on today's top stories. Let's have a roundup of what they had to say. Now, before closing our programme, let's take a look at social media to hear your voices and reactions on today's top stories shared with the hashtag German Election 2021. Here's what you've had to say about the German election on Twitter. Dr. Andre Kiel says a bit under the radar today because of the German elections 2021. But voters in Berlin have voted in favour of nationalising parts of the housing stock owned by big landlords in the city. Affordable housing will remain a key issue in German politics. And Dr. Nicole de Pulle says the result is the worst in a Bundestag election for the CDU-CSU. And the best achieved by the Green Party. And Farah Furi says Germany's increasingly old population is becoming a problem in this election. Only 14% of the people entitled to vote are below 30. No wonder young people do not feel represented by politics and lose faith. Sadly, older people continue to vote for openly corrupt politicians. And let's take a look now at our video of the day, which shows Germany's fight against climate change, which was also an important aspect during the elections. And that's all for this episode of The Edge with me, Andy Boynes. Stay tuned. We'll be back tomorrow with more in-depth analysis on the top stories and a look beyond the edge.